It's every teacher's favorite time of year. Woohoo! Standardized testing. It's even worse this year after spending nearly the whole year in fluctuation because of the COVID pandemic. Many schools reopened for the last quarter of school in the name of catching the kids back up. But it leads me to wonder if that's our truth when 1/3 of this last quarter is spent on testing. It's even worse for our SPED kids. The federal government requires that 95% of public school students take standardized tests, and only 1% are allowed to take adaptive tests. How's that fair for kids who already have adaptive instruction? There's nothing more heartbreaking than seeing a student who has come so far in academics break down in tears because they are unable to read the content on the standardized test. It's unethical, and I pray that organizations such as the National Organization for Fair and Open Testing will be able to make real changes in the way our students are tested. Nonetheless, we are held accountable to these tests, so we might as well make the best out of the situation. Today, I will give you some hints that I hope will help you get your students through their testing with little to no issues. Number 1, teacher-parent communication. Most years, I send a letter home to the parents to help them prepare their kids for testing. Here's a copy of the letter from last year. I do not remember where I got the template. It may have come from multiple places, or I may have just developed it myself. It reminds parents of the dates we are testing, asks for snack donations, and gives test preparation advice. Please note that this year, it is different in my classroom because of COVID. I only have one in-person student, and only one of my online students is not opting out of testing. Number 2, if your district's state allows it, give your kids a paper test instead of the computerized test. Many of our kids are clickers. They click through tests randomly, answering the questions to be finished quickly. It is harder for them to do this on a paper test, especially when they have an accommodation for the test to be read to them. It usually slows them down and forces them to really think about their answers. Another reason for paper tests is that for some people, reading on a computer is more difficult. I know that when I took online courses for college, that I always needed to print out my reading materials because it hurt my eyes to read off the computer, and it was harder for me to focus. I don't think this is any different for some of our kids. On years that I was able to give my students a paper test, their scores went up quite a bit. Unfortunately, we are told that if kids use computers for instruction, that they cannot be tested on paper. This year, most of our instruction has been on computers. In a regular year, some instruction is on the computer for engagement, but we never test on the computer due to the general lack of focus and distraction that many of my students have on the computer. I am half convinced that the reason for forcing computerized tests has more to do with the cost factor instead of what is truly good for the students. Number 3, let the students chew mint gum or suck on mint candy during the test. There have been several studies that have shown that chewing mint gum or sucking on mint hard candies helps people perform better on tests. For some reason, it helps with cognitive functioning and staying alert. It particularly helps working memory, episodic memory, and speed of processing. It's in my opinion that if it helps give our kids an edge, why not do it? 4, if possible, provide the students with a healthy breakfast and/or a healthy snack in between tests. A lot of times our kids do not have breakfast or rush through their breakfast at home, and good old Maslow tells us that food is right on the top of the hierarchy of needs. In the past, I've asked my parents or the PTO to donate healthy breakfast for our kids. Research shows that students who eat breakfast perform better in exams, especially when given slow-release carbs that slowly release energy. Number 5, teach your students test-taking strategies, such as, if using paper tests, practice Scantron tests. The visual layout of the answer sheet can be very confusing to students with visual, spatial, or fine motor problems. I have depth perception issues. When I was a kid, I struggled filling in Scantron forms accurately. I would get lost and skip lines on accident. I remember telling a teacher this, and he gave me this test twice, once using a Scantron and once using the method of circling the answers. I went from a C to an A on the same test. If you know your students have this issue, give them the option of having a scribe to fill in the bubbles for them. Teach students that often multiple choice questions have a correct answer, an answer that is obviously wrong, and then one or two choices that are close to the right answer. Teach them to eliminate the obviously incorrect answers first, and then reread the question and try to eliminate as many of the answers as possible before choosing one. Remind them that their instinctual answer is usually correct, so stick with their first answer unless they made an obvious mistake. In matching questions, show your students that they need to read all the choices before answering. Then answer the questions they are certain of first, eliminating the obvious and crossing them out before proceeding with those that they are uncertain of. For reading assessments, teach students to highlight the answer in the passage before answering. For time tests, teach students the art of skimming for the answer, especially if they are a slower reader. Teach students to look for bold and italicized words, how to look for context clues, and to read headings and graphics. According to mindsandbloom.com, when taking a standardized test, there are 3 things your students must be able to do. 1, know the content. 2, understand what the question is asking them to do. And 3, answer the question correctly. If they struggle in one of these areas, their chance of being successful on the assessment drops big time. Teaching your students academic vocabulary assures that they understand what the questions they are being asked want. One way that I do this is by using Lynette's test-taking task cards from Teacher Pay Teachers. I will link you to the resource on the description page. Here's a resource I found from Teacher Pay Teachers to teach academic vocabulary to the students. This vocabulary they need to know when they are taking tests so they understand what the test is asking so that they can answer the questions. This set has 4 different sets. Each set is a little bit different. I've only made one of the sets so far. I plan on laminating and cutting apart all the rest of the sets. Each set, like I said, is a little different. The first one helps the students understand the individual specific quote-unquote mighty word. The second one requires that they are able to apply the words. The third set has short passages in it, and the student must be able to read the passage and answer the question about it. So the third set has a little bit more rigor to it. And the fourth set just goes over some of the fairy tales that are well known, and it's for them to have extra practice using the vocabulary with these fairy tales. So I'm going to be using these sets in different ways. For example, one way I could do it is in a center setting. I could make these sets like I did here and put them in a binder clip, have them answer the questions using a vis-a-vis. You can use whiteboard markers. They're just harder to erase, and they smear more. Another way I was planning on using these is cutting up the second set and having the students find the sets, the different cards. What I'll do is I will hide them around the classroom, and they'll have a little scavenger hunt. And as they answer the questions, they will put them on this answer sheet, and whoever answers the most will win the game. third way I could do this is I could also use these cards in a scoot setting. So if you haven't done scoot, what you do is you put a card on each of the students' desks and give the students 20 seconds to answer the question, and then scoot over to the next desk until all of the questions are answered. What's good about this method is that it provides some movement, but order in the movement. Well, it's not as orderly, so we'd have to know that the kids are on the best behaviors in order to do the scavenger hunt. Another way I also would be happy to do is by just simply using the packets as they are and putting them in a plastic sheet. I like to reuse my materials so that I'm not wasting as much paper. And the plastic sheets could be used in a center setting, and again with a vis-a-vis or a whiteboard marker. Number 5, timers. I have many kids that just rush through the test without even looking at the content. The tests we take in Arizona have a recommended time that it takes for the students to take their test. I will not allow my students to submit the test or do anything else until they have sat for at least the minimum recommended time. This helps prevent some of the rushing that is involved while taking the test. I also remind the kids that these tests show others what they know. If they rush through it, they will be stuck reviewing work they already know how to do next year, instead of working on new exciting skills. This can even mean losing electives to enrichment classes when they reach the upper grades. This usually stops this from happening. Number 6. TeachJunkie.com has wonderful ideas for creating an encouraging testing environment. Here are some of the ideas that I'm going to steal from. Ask the parents of your students to write an encouraging note that the student can read before the test. This will not only help encourage your students, but it will also help forge the home-school connection, which is especially important in the self-contained classroom. So next time we do standardized testing, I would like to do more for my kids to raise their morale. They hear standardized testing and it brings up their anxiety, as a lot of them have anxiety disorders. Even though they can do the material, it just really makes them crazy and scares them. So here's one of the ideas. All the ideas, by the way, that I'm going to show you, I got free from Teachers Pay Teachers. We'll put it in the description box so that you can get these free resources yourself. So this first one, it says, do not stress, you'll ace the test. It really says, don't stress, you'll ace this test. But, you know, we're playing with the words. And I'll bring donuts in, I think, the first day of testing for them, just to make it a little more fun. Also, I plan on attaching this to their standardized testing number 2 pencils. So, again, to raise their morale, it says, you've got the right tools to succeed. And after they're finished with their test, I plan on attaching goldfish crackers to one of these. And it says, you're officially done with testing. How cute is that? Number 7, read Testing Marlarkey by Judy Finchler and The Big Test by Julie Danneberg. These books are great to read to students before testing. You can use these to help relieve test anxiety. They go over some of the procedures and some testing preconceptions that your students might have. Testing brings anxiety to a lot of our students, especially our kiddos with emotional behavioral disorders. Some students may need to be tested separately from the rest of the class so they can talk out their anxiety without disrupting the rest of the students. With these kids before the test, remind them to focus on their strengths. Help them put the test in perspective. The test is not the only measurement of what they have learned this year and the many skills that they've learned among all their years. In the long run, it doesn't matter if they make mistakes. Remind the student how proud you are of the hard work they did this year, and what matters is that they try their best. Standardized testing is only one way to measure understanding and what a student knows. In fact, with many of our kids, they're not a good measurement at all. But as the adults in their lives, we need to try to make this federal requirement as positive of an experience as possible. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, press like and subscribe. I'd sure like to know what you do in your classroom to make it not so terrible during standardized testing. I'm always looking for new ideas to make my classroom a little bit better. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.